Rob here from Media, and in this video we're going to go through sections and columns that you will use to build your pages in Elementor, so stay tuned. At Media, we help companies to grow and thrive using the latest tools, tricks and marketing techniques. From websites to online marketing, automated sales funnels, social media and much more. We're always releasing new content on our YouTube channel, so make sure you click the like, subscribe and notification button to make sure that you don't miss out. Just before we get going, I want to tell you about an exclusive offer we have on at the moment. We're giving away free access to our paid Hub platform to the first 50 people that click the link in the description. We're going to be putting this link in the description of all of our videos, so make sure that you get in there as quick as you can. Within Hub we have created over 100 training videos in 13 courses, including a course on how to build a website using Elementor. You'll also find recorded webinars and a host of other free content, so remember to click the link in the description. Let's get on with the video. Hello, in this video we will be talking about sections and columns. What are they and how do we use them? We'll also look at where to access settings in order to customize them and make our pages become the website we want them to be. This might come across as overwhelming to begin with, but I promise with some practice you will quickly grasp the concept of page structure. So what is a section? A section is an area of content on your website. You can break down your web pages into sections in order to display your content. If we forget about the nav bar and footer for a moment, a home page might be broken down into a header or hero image, a short about section which links to an about page, perhaps products and services next, and then a contact form. Each one of these could be classed as its own section. Of course, these aren't rules set in stone, but this is a good place to start. When you feel more confident with Elementor, you might start exploring the use of sections further. So what about columns? Sections are made up of columns, and it is in these columns that you will be dragging your elements and content into. Elements being headings, text blocks, videos and images, to name just a few. Let's now show you an example of sections and columns. I have here a page set to an Elementor full width template, and you can see what I mean by this in our page setup video. Let's jump straight into it and add a section. So we're going to click the pink plus button here, and here we can select how many columns we want our section to be made of. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4 and so on. Our first section is going to be a standard sort of hero / header image with some text and a heading, and I'm going to select 2 columns. So let's now add a video element into this. I'm also going to add a heading and some text. It's worth noting I won't be creating anything fancy here. I'm just going to show you the concept of structuring your pages. So it may not look like much, but this is going to be our first section. Now let's add another. You can add another section above by finding this plus button in this blue tab area here. That would add a section above, but we want to add a second section underneath this. So we're going to go back to our pink plus button. And this next section, I'm just going to have 1 column. And this is going to be a very basic about section. So I'm going to drag in another heading. Let's say that said about us, and maybe a little bit of text, and then a button that would click through to an actual about page. Finally, I'll add a services section and we'll display 3 different services available. So if I click the pink plus again, we can see that we've got multiple options when it comes to having 3 columns. I'm going to select the equal width columns, but of course you can select whichever one you feel suits your need. Later on in the video, I'm going to show you how we can manually set the width of these columns if you wanted to change your mind. So in these columns, I'm just going to add the names of our products. I'm then going to add some text underneath that might describe our product. And finally, we'll have some buttons that would click through to the product page. Now I may decide that I actually want 2 columns as I've stopped selling a product. I can delete a column by right-clicking on this grey Edit Column button here, and I can go down and select Delete. If I decide to sell the product again, rather than adding a new column by right-clicking and selecting Add New, I can actually duplicate the second column and replace the content as I need. Of course, if you duplicate the link over, you'll need to change the link back to product 3 as well. So you can duplicate and delete sections in a very similar way. Just go up to the blue tab. You can click the X to delete a section, and you can right click on the blue tab and duplicate. Before we go into the settings of sections and columns, this would be a great time for you to pause the video, go into your own web pages and add a few sections and columns and just have a little play around. So now we're going to look at the section settings. To access the section settings, we're going to go to the blue tab and we're going to find these 6 dots here, and we're going to click on those. And on the left, we've got edit section up here, and we can see that we can look at layout options, style options and advanced options. We're mostly going to look at layout. I'll breeze through style, and advanced we might look at padding. But let's first go to layout, and our first option is to stretch the section. Now when I click this, nothing happens. This is because we've already set the page up as an Elementor full width. This essentially forces the page to be full width if you didn't use the Elementor full width template. And you can see what I mean by Elementor full width template by going and watching the page setup video. So underneath we've got content width. Currently this is boxed, and you can tell it's boxed by looking at the content and the columns. On the sides of these marching ants, we can see we've got some large spaces. We can set the content width manually if we want to. And by default, the content width is, I think, 1140 pixels. I'm going to remove that and leave it on default. If we go to the drop down, we've got full width, which removes the spacing at the sides and uses all of the space in the section. Let's put that back to boxed. We've then got columns gap. This is on the default. If I go with no gap, you can now see that the content in each column is now near enough touching. If I go up to the wider option, we can see now that there is a large gap between the marching ants of the column and the content. If I go down to narrow, we can see that gets closer. So let's just leave that on the default. Then we've got the height of the section. If you choose fit screen, this will naturally try to make the section fit the size of the device that the visitor is viewing the website on. I would normally set the height manually though in min height. Currently the default here is 400 pixels, but because this is our first section, it's our header, it's important, I'm going to put this up to 600. So we can see now that this has forced our section to be a minimum height of 600 pixels. We've then got the column position. So when I hover over our columns, we can see exactly where our columns are. We've got a lot of space around them. Our first option is to stretch. Now we can see that the marching ants or the columns stretch from the top to the bottom of our section. If I go to top, we can see that our columns go back to their original size, but they start at the top of the section. And this is the same if I go to bottom. This time round, the columns start from the bottom. I'm going to set this to stretch for a moment because this will help us visualize vertical alignment, which is our next option. So vertical alignment, I'm going to set this to middle to show you how this works. This is how the content of your columns will vertically align with the section. So we've got bottom, top, middle. We've also got space between, evenly, and so on. And you can see that if I go to bottom, for example, the column stays stretched from the top to the bottom of the section. This just aligns the content inside. And in a moment, we're going to look at vertical alignment in the column settings, which essentially are the same thing, but they override the section vertical alignment. But let's put that on middle for now. And I'm going to go back to here and I'm going to select middle for column position. We've then got overflow. Now you shouldn't really need to use this unless you're using more advanced options like custom positioning, which might force some images off the page. And this essentially tells browsers that the content that's overspilling or overflowing off the screen is hidden. So let's just leave that on default. You shouldn't really need to use that. Then we've got the HTML tag, and again, just leave it on the default as Elementor really does that for you. Then we've got the structure. Earlier we chose even columns, but we can go into the structure drop down here and we can change these however we like. And in a moment we're going to change the width of these manually using the column settings. So let's leave it on 50/50. Then we've got style options very quickly. We've got classic, so we can change the color if we want to. We can put an image in. We've got hover options as well that you can explore. You can put in a slideshow, add some images in there, videos, so on. Background overlay, if you're using an image, it might be handy for you to put a background overlay on, perhaps a slightly darker one, just so that the text in front of the image stands out a little bit. Then you've got a border, so at we like solid borders. I'm just going to put a border in there and make sure that it's white. Shape dividers, these are a really cool way of making your pages look a little bit more interesting. And again, explore these and use them however you like. Advanced options, we won't explore many of these really in this video, but we've got our margin and padding options here should you need them. And you can see how that works. So I'm going to leave that on 8% all the way around for now. So let's now jump over to our column settings. All we have to do is find the grey edit column button here, which is in the top left of each column. Each column has its own settings. So you can go in and we can change the column width. So let's say I want this to be 33. That also naturally adjusts the column here on the left. If we want it to go back to 50/50, we can again change that and it should readjust itself. If you find that this glitches a little bit, you can go back to the section settings with the 6 dots, go to layout, structure, and change back to 50/50. So let's go back to the column settings. We've got vertical alignment. And as I mentioned, this does override any vertical alignment that you do in these sections. So for example, let's quickly jump back to section. Let's go to stretch. Let's go top. And you can see that the column here is overriding what we've set the section vertical alignment to be. Let's just go with middle then. I'm just going to jump back here, put that back to middle. Then we've got a horizontal alignment, and that works similarly. If you had perhaps rows of icons, you could set them to start one end of the column or the other end, put equal space between them so that they stretched across the column evenly, and so on. We then got widget space, and by default we can see that this is 20 pixels, and the widget space is the space between each element that you drag in. So between our heading and our text editor element, we can see there's 20 pixels, and we can up this to 50 for example. And if I drag in a button, we can see that it has a default space of 50 between that as well. Let's put that back to 20. And then we've got the HTML tag, and again, like sections, you might want to just leave this on default. Elementor will really do this for you, and you can come back and change this should you ever need to, but you should be fine. So quickly then, we'll just go over style. You can change the background of your columns so it's different to your sections, for example. So we set this to the orange. We've got border. Again, we could have another white border. Maybe a drop shadow on that as well. And then we've got advanced where we've got our margin options and we've got our padding options. Like so. That's it for sections and columns. As I said at the beginning of the video, this can appear quite daunting, but with practice and getting stuck in, you'll quickly get the hang of it. I really recommend you now go and watch the inner section video, as this will improve your building skills by teaching you a way of making more advanced structural designs. I promise it isn't as scary as it sounds, and I would also recommend that you check out the padding and margins video if you haven't already done so. As always, when you've finished editing your page, click the green update button and we will see you in the next video.